Midlife specifically, perimenopause, when we get into this hormonal fluctuation season, after 35 into 40, 45, 50, when our hormones are dancing all over the place, that in and of itself is an inflammatory event. So I was not only inside of the season where my hormones were starting to fluctuate, and that was creating a lot of added inflammation and was becoming an inflammatory event in my body, but I was also pairing that with a really overactive immune system. And the combination of both really had me feeling totally unglued in my body. And so I want to talk a little bit today about this idea of the gut immune connection. What is it? Why do we need to understand what it is? How have you maybe learned a little bit about it, but maybe it's not exactly what's going to actually serve you best? And what can you actually do if you're someone who can relate to this story? Today's focus is on the gut immune connection. And this is actually a really interesting topic, and something that can just become transformative when it comes to learning about your health and how the body functions. And I know for me, as someone who has gone through understanding what overactive immune disorder is, this has been one of the most transformative components to learning about the body's ecosystem. So just to quickly give you a snapshot of my background and my experience as a coach, but also on my personal health journey, I reached a point at 38 where my health was going backwards at an alarming rate. I did not change anything drastically with my habits, my routines, etc. And I was really in a hard spot mentally, emotionally, physically. I had all kinds of reactions happening. I got to a point where I couldn't eat anything without feeling sick. I was bloating up like I was 9 months pregnant every single day to all kinds of foods. It didn't matter what I was eating, how clean I was eating. I had all kinds of massive gut reactions happening. My skin was flaring out of control, specifically in certain environments. So we have family in Florida, and we go to Florida quite a bit. And for whatever reason, when I'm in humid environments with the potential for mold or other things in that damp situation, it really started to push my body into overdrive. So I would get hives and rashes and flushes, really itchy skin, specifically on my face. And it was so uncomfortable. And I remember feeling so defeated in that season because my body was really working against me. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea why I was reacting to everything. I had no idea why I felt so sick. And on top of that, I found myself gaining 35, almost 40 pounds out of what felt like nowhere. And it was really hard. And I have come to learn since that time through my own education as a coach, but also from working with my own mentor, my own coach, and going deeper on understanding the ecosystem, what this idea of overactive immune disorder really is. OID. Overactive immune disorder, or OID, stands for essentially your immune system being totally overreactive, literally in a situation where it is reactive to everything. And that's really how I felt. Again, no matter what I was doing, my body just felt like it was flaring up, like it was puffy, like it was inflamed, and nothing would resolve. So maybe you're someone who has experienced what I have. You've come up against weight gain seemingly out of nowhere, massive amounts of inflammation, flushes, rashes, seemingly having responses to all kinds of things from foods to environment, carrying around a lot of added water retention and inflammation, just feeling really puffy. And you don't even really know why. So let's get into it, because I want to talk about this idea of the gut immune connection, because there is so much to learn about how this actually affects our health. And there is so much to learn about what we can actually do to help with calming the system down, which at the end of the day, that's really what this is about. How do we really work on nurturing, fixing, restoring, optimizing the terrain? And this is the key to understand, especially when we're looking at wellness through the functional lens. We don't look at a symptom and chase the symptom. We don't look at something happening in the body and target it in isolation. We look at deeper ecosystem and ask ourselves why. So if there's ever a symptom coming up, the question that I always ask is, why is it happening? And that was really what was getting missed on my journey. I was having these reactions. I started to cut out foods. I went through so many elimination diets. I did a SIBO protocol, a low FODMAP protocol. I was taking tons of supplements. I was doing all kinds of things to essentially help my body restore, but nothing was going deep enough into the root to actually help my immune system calm down. And because my immune system was so activated underneath the surface, it didn't matter what I was trying to throw at it as far as restoring symptoms or cutting foods out. At the core, I wasn't resolving the issue. I wasn't going deep enough. So anytime I introduced a food again, or anytime I tried to like get back to, so to speak, the lifestyle that I was living, my body would inflame right back up. And it was like I started all the way back over from scratch. And that was really hard to figure out. So here's a common thing that I've heard from people. I know I've experienced this too, and maybe you have. It's this concept of, I used to be able to eat a bunch of things, but now I can't really eat them because they make me feel bloated. They make me feel tired. They make me feel inflamed. They make me feel miserable. They make me feel sick. I have a lot of pain, whatever it is. If that's you, this is a conversation you are definitely going to want to tune into, because this comes up for a lot of people, especially in the society we live in. And this is highly tied to the chemicals in our environment, the toxins in our environment, the things that are working against our physiology, that are making it harder for our guts to break things down, for our livers to detoxify, and so much more. So we have to be paying attention. We have to get educated. So if you're someone who's maybe experienced this and you have felt like, I've eaten certain things in the past and they've been okay, but now I try to eat them and they don't feel so good in my body. Or I eat them one day and they're okay, but then the next day they're not. Again, this is for you. Because the problem in and of itself is not the food. And you've maybe gone to a doctor. You've maybe done a food sensitivity test. You've maybe identified things like, oh, I'm allergic to gluten, or I'm sensitive to gluten. I'm sensitive to dairy. I'm sensitive to corn. I'm sensitive to soy, or whatever it is. And yeah, you are probably sensitive in some capacity. But the thing that we're not asking enough is why. So sure, you might get a food sensitivity test done, or you might work with the doctor and they'll tell you, oh, you're sensitive to gluten. You're sensitive to dairy. Just cut it out. And if you cut it out, yeah, your symptoms will probably resolve to a degree. But what happens when you actually try to introduce them back in, or you have it here and there? And beyond that, asking why. Like, why is the body reacting to gluten? Why are you more sensitive to dairy? The problem is the terrain underneath all of it. And the food reacting in the terrain is really a signal. It's a signal saying something is off here, and we have to go deeper into understanding. So when we think about the gut and the immune system, what I want you to know is 70% of the immune system lives in and around the gut. So the gut is not just digesting food and breaking food down and elimination and all of those things. The gut is responsible for so much more, including immune regulation, absorbing nutrients, hormone metabolism, inflammation control in the body, actually protecting everything around not absorbing what your body doesn't need. So the gut also acts as this protection barrier. And the thing is, when the gut becomes compromised, when it's stressed, inflamed, damaged, overwhelmed, it starts to deteriorate in some ways. It essentially goes down the road of this concept called leaky gut. That's when the gut lining becomes compromised. I've had this explained to me. Basically, you think about the gut as like this mesh lining, and there are things that we want the gut to absorb. We want to go into the bloodstream that are quality nutrients, things that are actually going to feed and fuel the body well. And then there are things we don't want. And so the mesh ideally lets through what we need and catches what we don't, and makes sure that it gets excreted and eliminated from the body. But what happens when the gut becomes leaky or compromised, or doesn't have the integrity that it maybe once had? Things that we don't want start to seep through it and get into the bloodstream, cause inflammation, cause reactions, and mostly start to over-aggravate the immune system more and more and more. And that's something that I've learned along the way. So how does the gut actually become compromised? Like, what actually causes that? Well, it's a variety of different things. One of the biggest things inside of working against the gut is our stress load. How stressed are we? What is our lifestyle like? How are we carrying stress? What are we doing mentally and emotionally on the stress side? How are we eating when we're managing our stress? Is it constantly sugar and processed crap and alcohol and stuff that's just really fueling our body with toxins and chemicals that aren't really serving us well? That is a huge component. The other component is maybe chronic infections, or things that we haven't been able to address deep enough because maybe we haven't been aware, or maybe we don't even know how to. Those all can pile up against the gut and become a really large problem. I think the thing that's really hard in this situation, in this conversation, is so many people feel like, I must be sensitive to these foods, or I must not be able to have them. And again, it's not the food that's the issue. It's more of the overall dysfunction. So the food becomes the trigger, but again, that's not necessarily the cause. And so that's the biggest thing I want to remind you of when you're thinking of, do I have food sensitivities? Why do I feel like my gut has changed? Why do I feel like I react to my gut more? There's a lot of really serious and significant physiological changes that happen not only in midlife, but then we pair that with lifestyle and maybe what we've done up until this point in our history. Again, there's a combination of things that start to really aggravate the gut and the immune system combined. So I quickly want to talk about food sensitivity testing because I know I've actually done food sensitivity tests in the past. I've heard this from clients. I've talked to other people about it, other women who are trying to understand their history, their story, their health, etc. And I want to talk about food sensitivity tests because this may ruffle some feathers. But here's the reality. Food sensitivity tests are maybe the biggest BS in the wellness space. And if you are relying on that to guide your journey, you are likely staying stuck in some way. Why? Because again, that's not solving the problem. It's showing what your system is maybe reacting to, but it's not identifying why. Like what is actually causing the immune system to react so heavily and so significantly? So again, many people will go into like removing 20 foods or cutting things out for a while, go into an elimination diet, and then maybe you'll feel a little bit better. But then once you start to implement things back in or you try to reintroduce, symptoms just come up and it's this cycle because you haven't actually addressed the gut environment, the immune system activation, why it's happening, the inflammation, the stress load, and what's actually causing the reactivity at the root. So all of those symptoms like bloating, fatigue, gas, digestive discomfort, food reactions, skin reactions, everything that I talked about in my story, they just keep coming up over and over and over, and it's exhausting. And so for me, one of the things I've had to learn about related to the immune system is how you actually calm it down. So there's a couple tools and lifestyle resources that I've used in my own journey. And this is something that I teach inside of my coaching program, depending on someone's specific situation. If you are highly sensitive and highly reactive to a lot of foods, a lot of things in your environment, air, water, whatever it is that you might be consuming in some capacity, then we absolutely have immune activation happening and we have to target that specifically to calm it down. So how do you do that? Well, there are a couple different kinds of peptides and bioregulators you can use. I've personally used peptides like thymosin alpha-1. I've also used bioregulators like LDN. Those are really powerful tools you can put in your toolbox to help with calming down the immune system. I've also used very specific diet variation strategies. So what does that mean? At the end of the day, our body reacts to all kinds of things, but mostly the carbohydrate intake is what can keep our body in reactivity mode. That keeps us in our growth mode, the mTOR pathway. We've talked about this kind of on other podcasts. But when we're really consuming carbohydrates all the time or overloading carbohydrates or having certain kinds of carbohydrates that are more processed, have more sugar, whatever, that's the kind of stuff that starts to break down the gut. That's the kind of stuff that keeps us stuck in one energy pathway when we think about our bodies metabolically. And so diet variation is a very specific lifestyle tool you can use with a strategy for a reason to heal or reduce inflammation and help the body stop immune reacting the same way through manipulating how you actually eat and what kind of foods you eat on certain days. Let me be very clear because I've had to say this to clients and I've had coaches tell me this too. I am not talking about a diet. I am not talking about extremes. I am not talking about restricting yourself because you're trying to hit a goal weight or you're trying to lean into the diet culture narrative of making yourself smaller. I'm talking about healing. I'm talking about healing phases with intention where you can choose to do that very strategically through lifestyle choices. That is a totally different ballgame and a mindset shift I work through very significantly and intentionally with my clients and with the women that come into my sphere that want to learn more about this concept, because this is one of those tricky things when we start to talk about diet variation, when we talk about, manipulating how we consume foods in certain ways, when we talk about how that can actually do things like calm down the immune system because we're starting to actually get out of mTOR and overreactivity through a lot of carbohydrate intake and essentially start to help push the body into more cellular cleanup. This is a healing practice. This is something that helps our bodies fight against disease. This has nothing to do with diet culture or restriction. And I want to really make that clear. Because when you're talking about calming down the immune system, there is so much you can do from a lifestyle standpoint that's pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. Head to aaronshrier.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is aaronshrier.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation. So I talked about tools like bioregulators and peptides. I talked about how I can manipulate diet through diet variation and different kind of strategies, which can be really powerful. So what else? What else can you do to actually heal the gut? What matters? Well, as I always talk about, testing is huge. So one of the things you can test for in things like the GI map or the gut zoomer or tests that look at the gut is you can see what's actually happening with the gut bacteria, good and bad. Do you have parasites? Do you have pathogens? How is the immune system functioning? Do you have adequate stomach acid or not? Where do you need more support with breaking down foods? Do you need digestive enzyme support? Where do you need to support the digestive tract in a very specific way in order to help support the gut and essentially calm down the immune system? So testing is a huge way to see that. And then you can figure out, okay, do I need to support my gut lining? Maybe through something like mega IgG, which is immunoglobulins. Those are huge for just supporting the integrity of the gut. Or maybe you need more digestive enzymes that help break down food when your gut is consuming food. There's certain digestive enzymes that help you break down fat. There's certain digestive enzymes that help you break down carbs and protein. There's some that help you break down all of it. Digestive enzymes can be huge. And sometimes, again, if you feel like you're sensitive to a food or you're overreacting to things, it might just be the digestive system needs better support. The gut lining needs more support. We need to have it feel like it's holding its integrity based on the support we have. Maybe you need digestive support. Your body needs more help breaking down food. Maybe you don't have adequate stomach acid levels. This is huge, especially if you are stressed. If you are a high achieving female, you are type A, you are running a house, you are running a business, you are working at the top of your corporate job, whatever it is. If you are a highly stressed person, you most likely need some level of stomach acid support. And this is something that I've learned. Stomach acid is huge for breaking down food and everything we consume too. So it's not only digestive enzymes, but we also have to have adequate stomach acid to make sure everything that we're consuming gets broken down and absorbed correctly and shuttled where it needs to go or eliminated because we don't need it. And so this is another big one. Maybe you need adequate stomach acid support. Maybe that's a reason why you feel sensitive to things. Balancing blood sugar is a huge one. I talk to my clients about this all the time. And this is probably the hardest and most alarming thing for women is this idea of we have to slowly learn and program our bodies to eat more. We have to be eating consistently throughout the day, energizing meals so our body feels safe and nurtured and loved and cared for. We have to do this also to make sure we're balancing our blood sugar because when we get into massive blood sugar dips where we've gone too long between meals or we haven't had a certain kind of food group, we're cutting out foods because somebody said we should, we're going to get into blood sugar roller coasters. And that doesn't do our bodies any favors, but especially our gut. Our gut starts to take a hit because that adds more stress on the body. Addressing chronic stress is also huge. So we talked about this. Stress is the number one hit against gut health. So we have to think about how are we nurturing our nervous system? How are we actually taking care of our stress? What are we doing to stress manage? Are we breathing? Are we journaling? Are we getting outside? Are we slowly chewing our food during our meals? How are we trying to address the chronic stress we all deal with in some capacity? Because we do. This is huge. The next one is sleep and recovery. If you are compromising your sleep, getting disrupted sleep, only sleeping 5 hours a night, your body has no time to rest and digest, to actually heal and repair, to get into cellular cleanup, and do all of these incredible functions that it's supposed to do when you are asleep at night. That is when the body restores itself the most. And when we're skimping on that, the body isn't able to actually repair itself or do all of the deep-rooted functions that it needs to in order to help optimize how you feel. And so the gut is also a part of that. Thinking about how the gut can also heal in some capacity during sleep, during recovery, during rest, that is a huge part of the puzzle and will always be a part of the health conversation. And then obviously continuing to look at the body as an ecosystem. So if we're thinking about, okay, what do we actually do to heal the gut? What else do we need to understand? This is why I believe in the power of targeted testing and things like comprehensive blood work. We can look at immune markers in blood work. We can also look at liver function and some level of gut function in blood work. When we look at things like iron panel and ferritin, we can kind of see a little bit related to the gut. Is the gut actually absorbing well? Some of the markers inside of those things can show us if we need to essentially go deeper into supporting gut health and how you're absorbing things, looking at hormones, looking at key minerals and vitamins, looking at inflammatory markers. All of those things can give us clues into our gut and our immune system functioning optimally, or do they need support? Are they suppressed or are they overactivated? If they are in either direction, what do we need to do from a holistic standpoint to actually help support these components? So at the end of the day, I want you to think a little bit about this concept. I want you to take a moment to think about if you are someone who maybe relates to this in some way. Are you someone who feels like you've had to cut out foods? Are you someone who's maybe done a food sensitivity test, but it hasn't really gotten you that far? Do you feel like maybe your immune system is overactivated for some reason because you're sensitive to a lot of things, but you don't know why? I want you to know it's not because your body is broken now and it can't function and this is the end and you're doomed. That is not it. This is all communication. This is all the ecosystem saying, hey, something is off. Something is off in the larger functionality of the body. What do we need to go down into to actually support? At the end of the day, the goal is to understand the why. If we're reacting to something, why? If a food feels more sensitive in the body, why? If we're super sensitive and our immune system seems to be overactivated, why is that? There are so many things inside of what can cause this. And I really believe it's so incredibly powerful to get educated about because it can start to transform how you think about your wellness. You know, there's a lot of education and research around how different parts of vaccines, post-2020 and COVID, all of these different pieces to the puzzle can also play a role in how our immune system functions and how it may be overactivated in some capacity. Full transparency, those are all things I'm still continuing to learn about. I'm still trying to continue to figure out, like, how could that play a role in our larger health picture? What do we need to be educated about around how those things could affect our immune system? The key to understand and remember is everything works together. Everything is interconnected. Nothing happens in isolation. And I like to remind people that I work with, talk about on this podcast, continue to educate on, because this is the mindset switch that changes everything. We're no longer looking at weight gain as happening in isolation. We're no longer looking at headaches as happening on its own. We're no longer looking at massive fatigue or erratic mood just because over here on an island. All of those things are intertwined somewhere and somehow. That's the value of functional health. That's the value of working with a functional health coach is you unpack history, you unpack symptoms, you unpack what's going on with things like your gut and immune system, and then you go all the way down into the root and ask why. What's driving this? Because it's never one thing. A lot of women, especially midlife, start to believe, well, it's my hormones. My hormones are out of whack. My hormones are imbalanced. It must be my hormones. And your hormones play a role. Absolutely. And like I talked about at the beginning of this podcast, hormone fluctuation in midlife in and of itself is an inflammatory event. It starts to throw off overall functionality and optimization in the ecosystem. And that is a very real change. It is not made up. It is very real. It is natural evolution that female bodies experience. So the thing is, when you pair that with what happens inside of the ecosystem with things like gut dysfunction, immune overactivation, et cetera, it just kind of becomes this perfect storm where you have to go deep enough into figuring out why. What is causing all of it? Most often it's stress. Most often it's not getting honest enough about daily habits, things like hydration, nutrition, sleep. Most often it's our history in some capacity, the way we've grown up, the way we've chronic dieted, the way we've been depriving, the way we've restricted, the way we've cut out food groups, whatever it is. I want to always remind each and every one of us, we don't just land where we are on our health. So my gut and immune situation that I talked about in my story, that didn't just randomly happen one day. It was an accumulation and a compounded situation that happened over time. And then finally, my bucket became so full that it just started to overreact more and more and more. And the other side of the coin to this is also paying attention to your environment. And I'll talk about this on other pieces to the show, but the environment and what's in our products, what's in our food, what's in our water, what's in our air, what's around us, that all plays a huge role. Like I talked about, there is so much working against our gut and our immune system in our overall environment, in our overall society. So how do we continue to get educated about cleaning up what's around us? That is another huge piece to the puzzle. So overall, when you start to look deeper than symptoms and begin to address the terrain, That's when you can finally stop managing problems and start creating true healing. And at the end of the day, that's what you want. The key is building resilience in the body. That's what we want. So building support, healing the body, building resilience. That is the way. So I am curious, have you found yourself ever eliminating things more and more, foods over the years, cutting out more and more things, but you haven't really been able to identify what's actually driving the reactions underneath? That's because it's not just the things you're eliminating. It's the terrain underneath. It's the terrain causing some sort of reaction for some reason, which is why going into the root matters. And so I hope and pray that this offered some level of value to you today. I like to share more about my gut and immune story and really what I've learned about gut and immune health in the body, because these two components inside of metabolic health, and when we think about optimizing our wellness, going after goals, understanding how to create body composition change, these are two crucial systems that we have to understand and we have to unpack as far as how they work. And once you start to learn more, you can slowly start to create more and more change. So these aren't as activated maybe as they have been, and you can calm them down and get to the place where you can wholeheartedly heal from the inside out. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.